Chapter 9. New Year's Calls. Now I'm going to turn over a new leaf, as I promised. I wonder what I shall find on the next page, said Rose, coming down on New Year's morning with a serious face and a thick letter in her hand.
Tired of frivolity, my dear? Asked her uncle, pausing in his walk up and down the hall to glance at her with a quick, bright look she liked to bring into his eyes.
No, sir, and that's the sad part of it, but I've made up my mind to stop while I can, because I'm sure it is not good for me. I've had some very sober thoughts lately, for since my Phoebe went away, I've had no heart for gaiety, so it is a good place to stop and make a fresh start, answered Rose, taking his arm and walking on with him.
An excellent time. Now, how are you going to fill the aching void? He asked, well pleased.
By trying to be as unselfish, brave, and good as she is. And Rose held the letter against her bosom with a tender touch, for Phoebe's strength had inspired her with a desire to be as self-reliant. I'm going to set about living in earnest, as she has, though I think it will be harder for me than for her, because she stands alone and has a career marked out for her. I'm nothing but a commonplace sort of girl with no end of relations to be consulted every time I wink, and a dreadful fortune hanging like a millstone round my neck to weigh me down if I try to fly. It is a hard case, Uncle, and I get low in my mind when I think about it, sighed Rose, oppressed with her blessings.
Afflicted child, how can I relieve you? And there was amusement as well as sympathy in Dr. Alec's face as he patted the hand upon his arm.
Please don't laugh, for I really am trying to be good. In the first place, help me to wean myself from foolish pleasures and show me how to occupy my thoughts and time so that I may not idle about and dream instead of doing great things. Good. We'll begin at once. Come to town with me this morning and see your houses. They are all ready, and Mrs. Gardner has half a dozen poor souls waiting to go in as soon as you give the word, answered the doctor promptly, glad to get his girl back again, though not surprised that she still looked with regretful eyes at the Vanity Fair, always so enticing when we are young. I'll give it today and make the new year a happy one to those poor souls at least. I'm so sorry that it's impossible for me to go with you, but you know I must help Auntie Plen receive. We haven't been here for so long that she had set her heart on having a grand time today, and I particularly want to please her because I have not been as amiable as I ought lately. I really couldn't forgive her for siding against Phoebe. She did what she thought was right, so we must not blame her. I am going to make my New Year's calls today, and, as my friends live down that way, I'll get the list of names from Mrs. G and tell the poor ladies, with Miss Campbell's compliments, that their new home is ready. Shall I? Yes, Uncle, but take all the credit to yourself, for I never should have thought of it if you had not proposed the plan. Bless your heart, I'm only your agent, and suggest now and then. I've nothing to offer but advice, so I lavish that on all occasions. You have nothing, because you've given your substance all away, as generously as you do your advice. Never mind, you shall never come to want while I live. I'll save enough for us too, though I do make ducks and drakes of my fortune. Dr. Alec laughed at the toss of the head with which she quoted Charlie's offensive words, then offered to take the letter, saying as he looked at his watch, I'll post that for you in time for the early mail. I like a run before breakfast. But Rose held her letter fast, dimpling with sudden smiles, half merry and half shy. No, thank you, sir. Archie likes to do that, and never fails to call for all I write. He gets a peep at Phoebe's in return, and I cheer him up a bit, for, though he says nothing, he has a hard time of it, poor fellow. How many letters in 5 days? 4, sir, to me. She doesn't write to him, Uncle. As yet. Well, you show hers, so it's all right, and you are a set of sentimental youngsters. And the doctor walked away, looking as if he enjoyed the sentiment as much as any of them. Old Miss Campbell was nearly as great a favorite as young Miss Campbell, so a succession of black coats and white gloves flowed in and out of the hospitable mansion pretty steadily all day. The clan was out in great force and came by in installments to pay their duty to Aunt Plenty and wish the compliments of the season to our cousin. Archie appeared first, looking sad but steadfast, and went away with Phoebe's letter in his left breast pocket, feeling that life was still endurable, though his love was torn from him. For Rose had many comfortable things to say and read him delicious bits from the voluminous correspondence lately begun. Hardly was he gone when Will and Geordie came marching in, looking as fine as gray uniforms with much scarlet piping could make them, and feeling peculiarly important, as this was their first essay in New Year's call-making. Brief was their stay, for they planned to visit every friend they had, and Rose could not help laughing at the droll mixture of manly dignity and boyish delight with which they drove off in their own carriage, both as erect as ramrods, arms folded, and caps stuck at exactly the same angle on each blonde head. Here comes the other couple, Steve, in full feather, with a big bouquet for Kitty, and poor Mac looking like a gentleman and feeling like a martyr, I'm sure, said Rose, watching one carriage turn in as the other turned out of the great gate, with its arch of holly, ivy, and evergreen. Here he is. I've got him in tow for the day and want you to cheer him up with a word of praise, for he came without a struggle, though planning to bolt somewhere with Uncle, cried Steve, falling back to display his brother, who came in looking remarkably well in his state and festival array, for polishing had begun to tell. A happy New Year, Auntie. Same to you, cousin, and best wishes for as many more as you deserve, said Mac, heeding Steve no more than if he had been a fly, as he gave the old lady a hearty kiss and offered Rose a quaint little nosegay of pansies. Heart's ease, do you think I need it? She asked, looking up with sudden sobriety. We all do. Could I give you anything better on a day like this? No, thank you very much. And a sudden dew came to Rose's eyes, for, though often blunt in speech, when Mac did do a tender thing, it always touched her, because he seemed to understand her mood so well. Has Archie been here? He said he shouldn't go anywhere else, but I hope you talked that nonsense out of his head, said Steve, settling his tie before the mirror. Yes, dear, he came, but looked so out of spirits I really felt reproached. Rose cheered him up a little, but I don't believe he will feel equal to making calls, and I hope he won't, for his face tells the whole story much too plainly, answered Auntie Plenty, rustling about her bountiful table in her richest black silk with all her old lace on. Oh, he'll get over it in a month or two, and Phoebe will soon find another lover, so don't be worried about him, Auntie, said Steve, with the air of a man who knew all about that sort of thing. If Archie does forget, I shall despise him, and I know Phoebe won't try to find another lover, though she'll probably have them, she is so sweet and good, cried Rose indignantly, for, having taken the pair under her protection, she defended them valiantly. Then you'd have arch hope against hope and never give up, would you? asked Mac, putting on his glasses to survey the thin boots which were his especial abomination. Yes, I would, for a lover is not worth having if he's not in earnest. Exactly. So you'd like them to wait and work and keep on loving till they made you relent or plainly proved that it was no use. If they were good as well as constant, I think I should relent in time. I'll mention that to Pemberton, for he seemed to be hit the hardest, and a ray of hope will do him good, whether he is equal to the 10 years' wait or not, put in Steve, who liked to rally Rose about her lovers. I'll never forgive you if you say a word to anyone. It is only Mac's odd way of asking questions, and I ought not to answer them. You will talk about such things, and I can't stop you, but I don't like it," said Rose, much annoyed. "Poor little Penelope. She shall not be teased about her suitors, but left in peace till her Ulysses comes home," said Mac, sitting down to read the mottos sticking out of certain fanciful bonbons on the table. "It is this fuss about Archie which has demoralized us all. Even the owl waked up and hasn't got over the excitement yet, you see. He's had no experience, poor fellow, so he doesn't know how to behave," observed Steve, regarding his bouquet with tender interest. "That's true, and I asked for information because I may be in love myself someday, and all this will be useful, don't you see?" "You in love!" And Steve could not restrain a laugh at the idea of the bookworm, a slave to the tender passion. Quite unruffled, Mac leaned his chin in both hands, regarding them with a meditative eye as he answered in his whimsical way. "Why not? I intend to study love as well as medicine, for it is one of the most mysterious and remarkable diseases that afflict mankind, and the best way to understand it is to have it. I may catch it someday, and then I should like to know how to treat and cure it." "If you take it as badly as you did measles and whooping cough, it will go hard with you, old fellow," said Steve, much amused with the fancy. "I want it to. No great experience comes or goes easily, and this is the greatest we can know, I believe, except death." Something in Mac's quiet tone and thoughtful eyes made Rose look at him in surprise, for she had never heard him speak in that way before. Steve also stared for an instant, equally amazed, then said below his breath, with an air of mock anxiety, "He's been catching something at the hospital, typhoid probably, and is beginning to wander. I'll take him quietly away before he gets any wilder. Come, old lunatic, we must be off." "Don't be alarmed. I'm all right, and much obliged for your advice, for I fancy I shall be a desperate lover when my time comes, if it ever does. You don't think it impossible, do you?" And Mac put the question so soberly that there was a general smile. "Certainly not. You'll be a regular Douglas, tender and true," answered Rose, wondering what queer question would come next. "Thank you. The fact is, I've been with Archie so much in his trouble lately that I've gotten interested in this matter and very naturally want to investigate the subject, as every rational man must, sooner or later, that's all. Now, Steve, I'm ready." And Matt got up as if the lesson was over. "My dear, that boy is either a fool or a genius, and I'm sure I should be glad to know which," said Aunt Plenty, putting her bonbons to rights with a puzzled shake of her best cap. "Time will show, but I incline to think that he is not a fool by any means," answered the girl, pulling a cluster of white roses out of her bosom to make room for the pansies, though they did not suit the blue gown half so well. Just then, Aunt Jessie came in to help them receive, with Jamie to make himself generally useful, which he proceeded to do by hovering around the table like a fly about a honey pot, when not flattening his nose against the window panes to announce excitedly, "Here's another man coming up the drive." Charlie arrived next in his most sunshiny humor, for anything social and festive was his delight, and when in this mood, the prince was quite irresistible. He brought a pretty bracelet for Rose and was graciously allowed to put it on while she chid him gently for his extravagance. "I am only following your example, for you know nothing is too good for those we love, and giving away is the best thing one can do," he retorted, quoting words of her own. "I wish you would follow my example in some other things as well as you do in this," said Rose soberly, as Aunt Plenty called him to come and see if the punch was right. "Must conform to the customs of society. Auntie's heart would be broken if we did not drink her health in the good old fashion. But don't be alarmed, I've a strong head of my own, and that's lucky, for I shall need it before I get through," laughed Charlie, showing a long list as he turned away to gratify the old lady with all sorts of merry and affectionate compliments as the glasses touched. Rose did feel rather alarmed, for if he drank the health of all the owners of those names, she felt sure that Charlie would need a very strong head indeed. It was hard to say anything then and there without seeming disrespect to Aunt Plenty, yet she longed to remind her cousin of the example she tried to set him in this respect, for Rose never touched wine, and the boys knew it. She was thoughtfully turning the bracelet with its pretty device of turquoise forget-me-nots when the giver came back to her, still bubbling over with good spirits. "Dear little saint, you look as if you'd like to smash all the punch bowls in the city and save us jolly young fellows from tomorrow's headache."
I should, for such headaches sometimes end in heartaches, I'm afraid. Dear Charlie, don't be angry, but you know better than I that this is a dangerous day for such as you, so do be careful for my sake, she added, with an unwanted touch of tenderness in her voice. For, looking at the gallant figure before her, it was impossible to repress the womanly longing to keep it always as brave and blithe as now. Charlie saw that new softness in the eyes that never looked unkindly on him, fancied that it meant more than it did, and, with a sudden fervor in his own voice, answered quickly, "My darling, I will." The glow which had risen to his face was reflected in hers, for at that moment it seemed as if it would be possible to love this cousin who was so willing to be led by her and so much needed some helpful influence to make a noble man of him. The thought came and went like a flash, but gave her a quick heart-throb, as if the old affection was trembling on the verge of some warmer sentiment, and left her with a sense of responsibility never felt before. Obeying the impulse, she said, with a pretty blending of earnestness and playfulness, "If I wear the bracelet to remember you by, you must wear this to remind you of your promise." "And you," whispered Charlie, bending his head to kiss the hands that put a little white rose in his buttonhole. Just at that most interesting moment, they became aware of an arrival in the front drawing-room, whither Aunt Plenty had discreetly retired. Rose felt grateful for the interruption, because, not being at all sure of the state of her heart as yet, she was afraid of letting a sudden impulse lead her too far. But Charlie, conscious that a very propitious instant had been spoiled, regarded the newcomer with anything but a benignant expression of countenance, and, whispering, "Goodbye, my Rose, I shall look in this evening to see how you are after the fatigues of the day," he went away, with such a cool nod to poor Fun C that the amiable Asiatic thought he must have mortally offended him. Rose had little leisure to analyze the new emotions of which she was conscious, for Mr. Tokyo came up at once to make his compliments, with a comical mingling of Chinese courtesy and American awkwardness, and before he had got his hat on, Jamie shouted with admiring energy, "Here's another! Oh, such a swell!" They now came thick and fast for many hours, and the ladies stood bravely at their posts till late into the evening. Then Aunt Jessie went home, escorted by a very sleepy little son, and Aunt Plenty retired to bed, used up. Dr. Alec had returned in good season, for his friends were not fashionable ones, but Aunt Myra had sent up for him in hot haste, and he had good-naturedly obeyed the summons. In fact, he was quite used to them now, for Mrs. Myra, having tried a variety of dangerous diseases, had finally decided upon heart complaint as the one most likely to keep her friends in a chronic state of anxiety, and was continually sending word that she was dying. One gets used to palpitations as well as everything else, so the doctor felt no alarm, but always went and prescribed some harmless remedy with the most amiable sobriety and patience. Rose was tired but not sleepy, and wanted to think over several things. So, instead of going to bed, she sat down before the open fire in the study to wait for her uncle, and perhaps Charlie, though she did not expect him so late. Aunt Myra's palpitations must have been unusually severe, for the clock struck 12 before Dr. Alec came, and Rose was preparing to end her reverie when the sound of someone fumbling at the hall door made her jump up, saying to herself,
Poor man, his hands are so cold he can't get his latchkey in. Is that you, Uncle? She added, running to admit him, for Jane was slow and the night as bitter as it was brilliant. A voice answered, yes, and as the door swung open, in walked not Dr. Alec, but Charlie, who immediately took one of the hall chairs and sat there with his hat on, rubbing his gloveless hands and blinking as if the light dazzled him, as he said in a rapid, abrupt sort of tone, I told you I'd come, left the fellows keeping it up gloriously going to see the old year out, you know. But I promised never break my word, and here I am. Angel in blue, did you slay your thousands? Hush, the waiters are still about. Come to the study fire and warm yourself. You must be frozen, said Rose, going before to roll up the easy chair. Not at all, never warmer. Looks very comfortable, though. Where's Uncle? Asked Charlie, following with his hat still on, his hands in his pockets, and his eye fixed steadily on the bright head in front of him. Aunt Myra sent for him, and I was waiting up to see how she was, answered Rose, busily mending the fire. Charlie laughed and sat down upon a corner of the library table. Poor old soul, what a pity she doesn't die before he is quite worn out. A little too much ether some of these times would send her off quite comfortably, you know. Don't speak in that way. Uncle says imaginary troubles are often as hard to bear as real ones, said Rose, turning around displeased. Till now she had not fairly looked at him, for recollections of the morning made her a little shy. His attitude and appearance surprised her as much as his words, and the quick change in her face seemed to remind him of his manners. Getting up, he hastily took off his hat and stood looking at her with a curiously fixed yet absent look as he said in the same rapid, abrupt way, as if, when once started, he found it hard to stop. I beg pardon, only joking. Very bad taste, I know, and won't do it again. The heat of the room makes me a little dizzy, and I think I got a chill coming out. It is cold. I am frozen, I dare say, though I drove like the devil. Not that bad horse of yours, I hope. I know it is dangerous, so late and alone, said Rose, shrinking behind the big chair as Charlie approached the fire, carefully avoiding a footstool in his way. Danger is exciting, that's why I like it. No man ever called me a coward. Let him try it once. I never give in, and that horse shall not conquer me. I'll break his neck if he breaks my spirit doing it. No, I don't mean that. Never mind, it's all right. And Charlie laughed in a way that troubled her, because there was no mirth in it. Have you had a pleasant day? Asked Rose, looking at him intently as he stood pondering over the cigar and match which he held, as if doubtful which to strike and which to smoke. Day? Oh, yes, capital. About 2,000 calls, and a nice little supper at the club. Randall can't sing any more than a crow, but I left him with a glass of champagne upside down, trying to give them my old favorite. 'Tis better to laugh than be sighing, and Charlie burst forth in that bacchanalian melody at the top of his voice, waving an allumette holder over his head to represent Randall's inverted wineglass. Hush! You'll wake Auntie, cried Rose, in a tone so commanding that he broke off in the middle of a roulade to stare at her with a blank look as he said apologetically, I was merely showing how it should be done. Don't be angry. Dearest, look at me as you did this morning, and I'll swear never to sing another note if you say so. I'm only a little gay. We drank your health handsomely, and they all congratulated me. Told him it wasn't out yet. Stop, though. I didn't mean to mention that. No matter. I'm always in a scrape, but you always forgive me in the sweetest way. Do it now, and don't be angry, little darling. And, dropping the vase, he went toward her with a sudden excitement that made her shrink behind the chair. She was not angry, but shocked and frightened, for she knew now what the matter was, and grew so pale he saw it and asked pardon before she could utter a rebuke. We'll talk of that tomorrow. It is very late. Go home now, please, before Uncle comes," she said, trying to speak naturally, yet betraying her distress by the tremor of her voice and the sad anxiety in her eyes. Yes, I will go. You are tired. I'll make it all right tomorrow." And, as if the sound of his uncle's name steadied him for an instant, Charlie made for the door with an unevenness of gait which would have told the shameful truth if his words had not already done so. Before he reached it, however, the sound of wheels arrested him, and, leaning against the wall, he listened with a look of dismay mingled with amusement creeping over his face. "Brutus has bolted. Now I am in a fix. Can't walk home with this horrid dizziness in my head. It's the cold, Rose, nothing else, I do assure you. And a chill, yes, a chill. See here, let one of those fellows there lend me an arm. No use to go after that brute."
"Won't Mother be frightened, though, when he gets home?" And with that empty laugh again, he fumbled for the door handle. No, don't let them see you. Don't let anyone know. Stay here till Uncle comes and he'll take care of you. Oh, Charlie, how could you do it? How could you when you promised?" And forgetting fear in the sudden sense of shame and anguish that came over her, Rose ran to him, caught his hand from the lock, and turned the key. Then, as if she could not bear to see him standing there with that vacant smile on his lips, she dropped into a chair and covered up her face. The cry, the act, and more than all, the sight of the bowed head would have sobered poor Charlie if it had not been too late. He looked about the room with a vague, despairing look, as if to find reason fast slipping from his control. But heat and cold, excitement and reckless pledging of many helds had done their work too well to make instant sobriety possible. And owning his defeat with a groan, he turned away and threw himself face downward on the sofa, one of the saddest sights the new year looked upon as it came in. As she sat there with hidden eyes, Rose felt that something dear to her was dead forever. The ideal, which all women cherish, look for, and too often think they have found when love glorifies a mortal man, is hard to give up, especially when it comes in the likeness of the first lover who touches a young girl's heart. Rose had just begun to feel that perhaps this cousin, despite his faults, might yet become the hero that he sometimes looked, and the thought that she might be his inspiration was growing sweet to her, although she had not entertained it until very lately. Alas, how short the tender dream had been, how rude the awakening! How impossible it would be ever again to surround that fallen figure with all the romance of an innocent fancy, or gift it with the high attributes beloved by a noble nature. Breathing heavily in the sudden sleep that kindly brought a brief oblivion of himself, he lay with flushed cheeks, disordered hair, and at his feet the little Rose that never would be fresh and fair again, a pitiful contrast now to the brave, blithe young man who went so gaily out that morning to be so ignominiously overthrown at night. Many girls would have made light of a trespass so readily forgiven by the world, but Rose had not yet learned to offer temptation with a smile and shut her eyes to the weakness that makes a man a brute. It always grieved or disgusted her to see it in others, and now it was very terrible to have it brought so near, not in its worst form by any means, but bad enough to wring her heart with shame and sorrow and fill her mind with dark forebodings for the future. So she could only sit mourning for the Charlie that might have been, while watching the Charlie that was, with an ache in her heart which found no relief, till, putting her hands there as if to ease the pain, they touched the pansies, faded but still showing gold among the somber purple, and then 2 great tears dropped on them as she sighed, "Ah, me, I do need heart's ease sooner than I thought." Her uncle's step made her spring up and unlock the door, showing him such an altered face that he stopped short, ejaculating in dismay, "Good heavens, child, what's the matter?" adding, as she pointed to the sofa in pathetic silence, "Is he hurt?"
Ill? Dead? No, Uncle, he is— She could not utter the ugly word, but whispered with a sob in her throat, "Be kind to him," and fled away to her own room, feeling as if a great disgrace had fallen on the house. Chapter 10. The Sad and Sober Part. How will he look? What will he say? Can anything make us forget and be happy again? Were the first questions Rose asked herself as soon as she woke from the brief sleep which followed a long, sad vigil. It seemed as if the whole world must be changed because a trouble darkened it for her. She was too young yet to know how possible it is to forgive much greater sins than this, forget far heavier disappointments, outlive higher hopes, and bury loves compared to which hers was but a girlish fancy. She wished it had not been so bright a day, wondered how her birds could sing with such shrill gaiety, put no ribbon in her hair, and said, as she looked at the reflection of her own tired face in the glass, "Poor thing, you thought the new leaf would have something pleasant on it. The story has been very sweet and easy to read so far, but the sad and sober part is coming now." A tap at the door reminded her that, in spite of her afflictions, breakfast must be eaten, and the sudden thought that Charlie might still be in the house made her hurry to the door to find Dr. Alec waiting for her with his morning smile. She drew him in and whispered anxiously, as if someone lay dangerously ill nearby, "Is he better, Uncle? Tell me all about it. I can bear it now." Some men would have smiled at her innocent distress and told her this was only what was to be expected and endured. But Dr. Alec believed in the pure instincts that make youth beautiful, desired to keep them true, and hoped his girl would never learn to look unmoved by pain and pity upon any human being vanquished by a vice, no matter how trivial it seemed, how venial it was held. So his face grew grave, though his voice was cheerful as he answered, "All right, I dare say, by this time, for sleep is the best medicine in such cases. I took him home last night, and no one knows he came but you and I." "No one ever shall. How did you do it, Uncle?" "Just slipped out of the long study window and got him cunningly off, for the air and motion, after a dash of cold water, brought him around, and he was glad to be safely landed at home. His rooms are below, you know, so no one was disturbed, and I left him sleeping nicely." "Thank you so much," sighed Rose. "And Brutus, weren't they frightened when he got back alone?" "Not at all. The sagacious beast went quietly to the stable, and the sleepy groom asked no questions, for Charlie often sends the horse round by himself when it is late or stormy. Rest easy, dear, no eye but ours saw the poor lad come and go, and we'll forgive it for love's sake." "Yes, but not forget it. I never can, and he will never be again to me the Charlie I've been so proud and fond of all these years. Oh, Uncle, such a pity, such a pity." "Don't break your tender heart about it, child, for it is not incurable, thank God. I don't make light of it, but I am sure that under better influences Charlie will redeem himself, because his impulses are good, and this his only vice. I can hardly blame him for what he is, because his mother did the harm. I declare to you, Rose, I sometimes feel as if I must break out against that woman and thunder in her ears that she is ruining the immortal soul for which she is responsible to heaven." Dr. Alec seldom spoke in this way, and when he did, it was rather awful, for his indignation was of the righteous sort, and such thunder often rouses up a drowsy soul when sunshine has no effect. Rose liked it, and sincerely wished Aunt Clara had been there to get the benefit of the outbreak, for she needed just such an awakening from the self-indulgent dream in which she lived. "Do it, and save Charlie before it is too late," she cried, kindling herself as she watched him, for he looked like a roused lion as he walked about the room with his hand clenched and a spark in his eye, evidently in desperate earnest and ready to do almost anything. "Will you help?" he asked, stopping suddenly with a look that made her stand up straight and strong as she answered with an eager voice, "I will." "Then don't love him yet." That startled her, but she asked steadily, though her heart began to beat and her color to come, "Why not?" Firstly, because no woman should give her happiness into the keeping of a man without fixed principles. Secondly, because the hope of being worthy of you will help him more than any prayers or preaching of mine. Thirdly, because it will need all our wit and patience to undo the work of nearly 24 years. You understand what I mean? Yes, sir. Can you say no when he asks you to say yes and wait a little for your happiness? I can. And will you? I will. Then I'm satisfied and a great weight taken off my heart. I can't help seeing what goes on, or trembling when I think of you setting sail with no better pilot than poor Charlie. Now you answer as I hoped you would, and I am proud of my girl. They had been standing with the width of the room between them, Dr. Alec looking very much like a commander issuing orders. Rose like a well-drilled private obediently receiving them, and both wore the air of soldiers getting ready for a battle, with the bracing of nerves and quickening of the blood brave souls feel as they put on their armor. At the last words he went to her, brushed back the hair, and kissed her on the forehead with a tender sort of gravity and a look that made her feel as if he had endowed her with the Victoria Cross for courage on the field. No more was said then, for Aunt Plenty called them down and the day's duties began. But that brief talk showed Rose what to do and fitted her to do it, for it set her to thinking of the duty one owes oneself in loving as in all the other great passions or experiences which make or mar a life. She had plenty of time for quiet meditation that day because everyone was resting after yesterday's festivity, and she sat in her little room planning out a new year so full of good works, grand successes, and beautiful romances that if it could have been realized, the millennium would have begun. It was a great comfort to her, however, and lightened the long hours haunted by a secret desire to know when Charlie would come and a secret fear of the first meeting. She was sure he would be bowed down with humiliation and repentance, and a struggle took place in her mind between the pity she could not help feeling and the disapprobation she ought to show. She decided to be gentle, but very frank, to reprove, but also to console, and to try to improve the softened moment by inspiring the culprit with a wish for all the virtues which make a perfect man. The fond delusion grew quite absorbing, and her mind was full of it as she sat watching the sun set from her western window and admiring with dreamy eyes the fine effect of the distant hills, clear and dark against a daffodil sky, when the bang of a door made her sit suddenly erect in her low chair and say with a catch in her breath, "He's coming. I must remember what I promised Uncle and be very firm." Usually, Charlie announced his approach with music of some sort. Now he neither whistled, hummed, nor sang, but came so quietly Rose was sure that he dreaded this meeting as much as she did, and, compassionating his natural confusion, did not look around as the steps drew near. She thought perhaps he would go down upon his knees, as he used to after a boyish offense, but hoped not, for too much humility distressed her, so she waited for the first demonstration anxiously. It was rather a shock when it came, however, for a great nosegay dropped into her lap, and a voice, bold and gay as usual, said lightly, "Here she is, as pretty and pensive as you please. Is the world hollow? Are dolls stuffed with sawdust? And do we want to go into a nunnery today, cousin?" Rose was so taken aback by this unexpected coolness that the flowers lay unnoticed as she looked up with a face so full of surprise, reproach, and something like shame that it was impossible to mistake its meaning. Charlie did not, and had the grace to redden deeply, and his eyes fell as he said quickly, though in the same light tone, "I humbly apologize for coming so late last night. Don't be hard upon me, cousin. You know America expects every man to do his duty on New Year's Day." I am tired of forgiving. You make and break promises as easily as you did years ago, and I shall never ask you for another," answered Rose, putting the bouquet away, for the apology did not satisfy her, and she would not be bribed to silence. "But, my dear girl, you are so very exacting, so peculiar in your notions, and so angry about trifles that a poor fellow can't please you, try as he will," began Charlie, ill at ease, but too proud to show half the penitence he felt, not so much for the fault as for her discovery of it. "I am not angry, I am grieved and disappointed, for I expect every man to do his duty in another way and keep his word to the uttermost, as I try to do. If that is exacting, I'm sorry, and won't trouble you with my old-fashioned notions any more. Bless my soul, what a rout about nothing! I own that I forgot, I know I acted like a fool, and I beg pardon. What more can I do? Act like a man, and never let me be so terribly ashamed of you again as I was last night." And Rose gave a little shiver as she thought of it. That involuntary act hurt Charlie more than her words, and it was his turn now to feel terribly ashamed, for the events of the previous evening were very hazy in his mind, and fear magnified them greatly. Turning sharply away, he went and stood by the fire, quite at a loss how to make his peace this time, because Rose was so unlike herself. Usually a word of excuse sufficed, and she seemed glad to pardon and forget. Now, though very quiet, there was something almost stern about her that surprised and daunted him. For how could he know that all the while her pitiful heart was pleading for him, and the very effort to control it made her a little hard and cold? As he stood there, restlessly fingering the ornaments upon the chimney-piece, his eye brightened suddenly, and taking up the pretty bracelet lying there, he went slowly back to her, saying in a tone that was humble and serious enough now, "I will act like a man, and you shall never be ashamed again. Only be kind to me. Let me put this on, and promise afresh this time. I swear I'll keep it. Won't you trust me, Rose?" It was very hard to resist the pleading voice and eyes, for this humility was dangerous, and, but for Uncle Alec, Rose would have answered yes. The blue forget-me-nots reminded her of her own promise, and she kept it with difficulty now, to be glad always afterward. Putting back the offered trinket with a gentle touch, she said firmly, though she dared not look up into the anxious face bending toward her, "No, Charlie, I can't wear it. My hands must be free if I'm to help you as I ought. I will be kind, I will trust you, but don't swear anything. Only try to resist temptation, and we'll all stand by you." Charlie did not like that, and lost the ground he had gained by saying impetuously, "I don't want anyone but you to stand by me, and I must be sure you won't desert me, else, while I'm mortifying soul and body to please you, some stranger will come and steal your heart away from me. I couldn't bear that, so I give you fair warning, in such a case I'll break the bargain and go straight to the devil." The last sentence spoiled it all, for it was both masterful and defiant. Rose had the Campbell spirit in her, though it seldom showed. As yet, she valued her liberty more than any love offered her, and she resented the authority he assumed, too much resented it all the more warmly because of the effort she was making to reinstate her hero, who would insist on being a very faulty and ungrateful man. She rose straight out of her chair, saying with a look and tone which rather startled her hearer and convinced him that she was no longer a tender-hearted child, but a woman with a will of her own and a spirit as proud and fiery as any of her race. "My heart is my own, to dispose of as I please. Don't shut yourself out of it by presuming too much, for you have no claim on me but that of cousinship, and you never will have unless you earn it. Remember that, and neither threaten nor defy me any more." For a minute, it was doubtful whether Charlie would answer this flash with another, and a general explosion ensue, or wisely quench the flame with the mild answer which turneth away wrath. He chose the latter course, and made it very effective by throwing himself down before his offended goddess, as he had often done in jest. This time it was not acting, but serious, earnest, and there was real passion in his voice as he caught Rose's dress in both hands, saying eagerly, "No, no, don't shut your heart against me, or I shall turn desperate. I'm not half good enough for such a saint as you, but you can do what you will with me. I only need a motive to make a man of me, and where can I find a stronger one than in trying to keep your love?" "It is not yours yet," began Rose, much moved, though all the while she felt as if she were on a stage and had a part to play, for Charlie had made life so like a melodrama that it was hard for him to be quite simple even when most sincere. "Let me earn it then. Show me how, and I'll do anything, for you are my good angel, Rose, and if you cast me off, I feel as if I shouldn't care how soon there was an end of me," cried Charlie, getting tragic in his earnestness and putting both arms around her, as if his only safety lay in clinging to this beloved fellow creature. Behind footlights, it would have been irresistible, but somehow it did not touch the one spectator, though she had neither time nor skill to discover why. For all their ardor, the words did not ring quite true. Despite the grace of the attitude, she would have liked him better manfully erect upon his feet. And though the gesture was full of tenderness, a subtle instinct made her shrink away, as she said with a composure that surprised herself even more than it did him, "Please don't. No, I will promise nothing yet, for I must respect the man I love." That brought Charlie to his feet, pale with something deeper than anger, for the recoil told him more plainly than the words how much he had fallen in her regard since yesterday. The memory of the happy moment when she gave the rose with that new softness in her eyes, the shy color, the sweet "for my sake," came back with sudden vividness, contrasting sharply with the now averted face, the hand outstretched to put him back, the shrinking figure, and in that instant silence, poor Charlie realized what he had lost. For a girl's first thought of love is as delicate a thing as the rosy morning glory, which a breath of air can shatter. Only a hint of evil, only an hour's debasement for him, a moment's glimpse for her of the coarser pleasures men know, and the innocent heart, just opening to bless and to be blessed, closed again like a sensitive plant and shut him out, perhaps forever. The consciousness of this turned him pale with fear, for his love was deeper than she knew, and he proved this when he said in a tone so full of mingled pain and patience that it touched her to the heart, "You shall respect me if I can make you, and when I've earned it, may I hope for something more?" She looked up then, saw in his face the noble shame, the humble sort of courage that shows repentance to be genuine and gives promise of success, and, with a hopeful smile that was a cordial to him, answered heartily, "You may." "Bless you for that. I'll make no promises. I'll ask for none. Only trust me, Rose. And while you treat me like a cousin, remember that no matter how many lovers you may have, you'll never be to any of them as dear as you are to me." A traitorous break in his voice warned Charlie to stop there, and with no other goodbye, he very wisely went away, leaving Rose to put the neglected flowers into water with remorseful care, and lay away the bracelet, saying to herself, "I'll never wear it till I feel as I did before. Then he shall put it on, and I'll say yes." Chapter 11. Small Temptations. "Oh, Rose, I've got something so exciting to tell you," cried Kitty Van Tassel, skipping into the carriage next morning when her friend called for her to go shopping. Kitty always did have some perfectly thrilling communication to make, and Rose had learned to take them quietly. But the next demonstration was a new one, for, regardless alike of curious observers outside and disordered hats within, Kitty caught Rose around the neck, exclaiming in a rapturous whisper, "My dearest creature, I'm engaged!" "I'm so glad. Of course it is, Steve." "Dear fellow, he did it last night in the nicest way, and Mama is so delighted. Now what shall I be married in?" And Kitty composed herself with a face full of the deepest anxiety. "How can you talk of that so soon? Why, Kit, you unromantic girl, you ought to be thinking of your lover and not your clothes," said Rose, amused yet rather scandalized at such want of sentiment. "I am thinking of my lover, for he says he will not have a long engagement, so I must begin to think about the most important things at once, mustn't I?" "Ah, he wants to be sure of you, for you are such a slippery creature. He is afraid you'll treat him as you did poor Jackson and the rest," interrupted Rose, shaking her finger at her prospective cousin, who had tried this pastime twice before and was rather proud than otherwise of her brief engagements. "You needn't scold, for I know I'm right, and when you've been in society as long as I have, you'll find that the only way to really know a man is to be engaged to him. While they want you, they are all devotion, but when they think they've got you, then you find out what wretches they are," answered Kitty with an air of worldly wisdom which contrasted oddly with her youthful face and giddy manners. "A sad prospect for poor Steve, unless I give him a hint to look well to his ways." "Oh, my dear child, I'm sure of him, for my experience has made me very sharp, and I'm convinced I can manage him without a bit of trouble. We've known each other for ages." Steve was 20 and Kitty 18, "and always been the best of friends. Besides, he is quite my ideal man. I never could bear big hands and feet, and his are simply adorable. Then he's the best dancer I know, and dresses in perfect taste. I really do believe I fell in love with his pocket handkerchiefs first. They were so enchanting, I couldn't resist," laughed Kitty, pulling a large one out of her pocket and burying her little nose in the folds, which shed a delicious fragrance upon the air. "Now that looks promising, and I begin to think you have got a little sentiment after all," said Rose, well pleased, for the merry brown eyes had softened suddenly, and a quick color came up in Kitty's cheek as she answered, still half hiding her face in the beloved handkerchief. "Of course I have, lots of it. Only I'm ashamed to show it to most people, because it's the style to take everything in the most nonchalant way. My gracious, Rose, you'd have thought me a romantic goose last night while Steve proposed in the back parlor, for I actually cried. He was so dreadfully in earnest when I pretended that I didn't care for him, and so very dear and nice when I told the truth. I didn't know he had it in him, but he came out delightfully and never cared a particle, though I dropped tears all over his lovely short front. Wasn't that good of him? For you know he hates his things to be mussed. He's a true Campbell and has got a good warm heart of his own under those fine fronts of his. Aunt Jane doesn't believe in sentiment, so he has been trained never to show any, but it is there, and you must encourage him to let it out, not foolishly, but in a way to make him more manly and serious. I will if I can, for though I wouldn't own this to everybody, I like it in him very much, and feel as if Steve and I should get on beautifully. Here we are now. Be sure not to breathe a word if we meet anyone. I want it to be a profound secret for a week at least," added Kitty, whisking her handkerchief out of sight as the carriage stopped before the fashionable store they were about to visit. Rose promised with a smile, for Kitty's face betrayed her without words, so full was it of the happiness which few eyes fail to understand whenever they see it. Just a glance at the silks. You ask my opinion about white ones, and I'll look at the colors. Mama says satin, but that is out now, and I've set my heart on the heaviest corded thing I can find, whispered Kitty as they went rustling by the long counters strewn with all that could delight the feminine eye and tempt the feminine pocket. Isn't that opal the loveliest thing you ever saw? I'm afraid I'm too dark to wear it, but it would just suit you. You'll need a variety, you know, added Kitty in a significant aside as Rose stood among the white silks while her companion affected great interest in the delicate hues laid before her. But I have a variety now and don't need a new dress of any sort. No matter, get it, else it will be gone. You've worn all yours several times already and must have a new one whether you need it or not. Dear me, if I had as much pocket money as you have, I'd come out in a fresh toilet at every party I went to, answered Kitty, casting an envious eye upon the rainbow piles before her. The quick-witted shopman saw that a wedding was afoot, for when two pretty girls whisper, smile, and blush over their shopping, clerks scent bridal finery, and a transient gleam of interest brightens their imperturbable countenances and lends a brief energy to languid voices weary with crying, "Cash." Gathering both silks with a practiced turn of the hand, he held them up for inspection, detecting at a glance which was the bridal elect and which the friend, for Kitty fell back to study the effect of silvery white folds with an absorbing interest impossible to mistake, while Rose sat looking at the opal as if she scarcely heard a bland voice saying, with the rustle of silk so dear to girlish ears, "A superb thing, just opened, all the rage in Paris, very rare shade, trying to most, as the lady says, but quite perfect for a blonde." Rose was not listening to those words, but to others which Aunt Clara had lately uttered, laughed at then, but thought over more than once since. "I'm tired of hearing people wonder why Miss Campbell does not dress more. Simplicity is all very well for schoolgirls and women who can't afford anything better, but you can, and you really ought. Your things are pretty enough in their way, and I rather like you to have a style of your own, but it looks odd, and people will think you are mean if you don't make more show. Besides, you don't do justice to your beauty, which would be both peculiar and striking if you devote your mind to getting up ravishing costumes." Much more to the same effect did her aunt say, discussing the subject quite artistically and unconsciously appealing to several of Rose's ruling passions. One was a love for the delicate fabrics, colors, and ornaments which refined tastes enjoy, and whose costliness keeps them from ever growing common. Another, her strong desire to please the eyes of those she cared for and gratify their wishes in the smallest matter if she could. And last, but not least, the natural desire of a young and pretty woman to enhance the beauty which she so soon discovers to be her most potent charm for the other sex, her passport to a high place among her maiden peers. She had thought seriously of surprising and delighting everyone by appearing in a costume which should do justice to the loveliness which was so modest that it was apt to forget itself in admiring others, what girls call a ravishing dress, such as she could imagine and easily procure by the magic of the Fortunatus's purse in her pocket. She had planned it all, the shimmer of pale silk through lace like woven frostwork, ornaments of some classic pattern, and all the dainty accessories as perfect as time, taste, and money could make them. She knew that Uncle Alec's healthful training had given her a figure that could venture on any fashion, and nature blessed her with a complexion that defied all hues. So it was little wonder that she felt a strong desire to use these gifts, not for the pleasure of display, but to seem fair in the eyes that seldom looked at her without a tender sort of admiration, all the more winning when no words marred the involuntary homage women love. These thoughts were busy in Rose's mind as she sat looking at the lovely silk and wondering what Charlie would say if she should some night burst upon him in a pale rosy cloud like the aurora to whom he often likened her. She knew it would please him very much, and she longed to do all she honestly could to gratify the poor fellow, for her tender heart already felt some remorseful pangs, remembering how severe she had been the night before. She could not revoke her words because she meant them every one, but she might be kind and show that she did not wholly shut him out from her regard by asking him to go with her to Kitty's ball and gratify his artistic taste by a lovely costume. A very girlish but kindly plan, for that ball was to be the last of her frivolities, so she wanted it to be a pleasant one and felt that being friends with Charlie would add much to her enjoyment. This idea made her fingers tighten on the gleaming fabric so temptingly upheld, and she was about to take it when, "If you please, sir, would you kindly tell me where I'd be findin' the flannel place?" said a voice behind her, and glancing up, she saw a meek little Irishwoman looking quite lost and out of place among the luxuries around her. "Downstairs, turn to the left," was the clerk's hasty reply, with a vague wave of the hand which left the inquirer more in the dark than ever. Rose saw the woman's perplexity and said kindly, "I'll show you this way." "I'm ashamed to be troublin' you, miss, but it's strange I am in it, and wouldn't be comin' here at all, barrin' they told me I'd get the bit I'm wantin' chappin' in this big shop than the little ones more becomin' the like o' me," explained the little woman humbly. Rose looked again as she led the way through a well-dressed crowd of busy shoppers, and something in the anxious, tired face under the old woolen hood, the bare, purple hands holding fast a meager wallet, and a faded scrap of the dotted flannel little children's frocks are so often made of, touched the generous heart that never could see want without an impulse to relieve it. She had meant only to point the way, but, following a new impulse, she went on, listening to the poor soul's motherly prattle about "me baby" and the trouble it was to find clothes for the growin' childer when me man is out of work, and the bit and sup inconvenient these hard times, as they descended to that darksome lower world where necessities take refuge when luxuries crowd them out from the gayer place above. The presence of a lady made Mrs. Sullivan's shopping very easy now, and her one poor bit of flannel grew miraculously into yards of several colors, since the shabby purse was no lighter when she went away, wiping her eyes on the corner of a big brown bundle. A very little thing, and no one saw it but a wooden-faced clerk who never told, yet it did Rose good and sent her up into the light again with a sober face, thinking self-reproachfully, "What right have I to more gay gowns when some poor babies have none, or to spend time making myself fine when there is so much bitter want in the world?" Nevertheless, the pretty things were just as tempting as ever, and she yearned for the opal silk with a renewed yearning when she got back. It is not certain that it would not have been bought in spite of her better self, if a good angel in the likeness of a stout lady with silvery curls about the benevolent face, enshrined in a plain bonnet, had not accosted her as she joined Kitty, still brooding over the wedding gowns. "I waited a moment for you, my dear, because I'm in haste, and very glad to save myself a journey or a note," began the newcomer in a low tone, as Rose shook hands with the most affectionate respect. "You know the great box factory was burned a day or two ago, and over 100 girls thrown out of work. Some were hurt and are in the hospital, many have no homes to go to, and nearly all need temporary help of some sort. We've had so many calls this winter, I hardly know which way to turn, for want is pressing, and I've had my finger in so many purses I'm almost ashamed to ask again. Any little contribution, thank you, I was sure you wouldn't fail me, my good child. and Mrs. Gardner warmly pressed the hand that went so quickly into the little porte-monnaie and came out so generously filled. "Let me know how else I can help, and thank you very much for allowing me to have a share in your good works," said Rose, forgetting all about gay gowns as she watched the black bonnet go briskly away with an approving smile on the fine old face inside it. "You extravagant thing! How could you give so much?" whispered Kitty, whose curious eye had seen 3 figures on the single bill which had so rapidly changed hands. "I believe if Mrs. Gardner asked me for my head, I should give it to her," answered Rose lightly. Then, turning to the silks, she asked, "Which have you decided upon? The yellow, white, or the blue? The corded, or the striped?" "I've decided nothing, except that you are to have the pink and wear it at my ball," said Kitty, who had made up her mind, but could not give her orders till Mamma had been consulted. "No, I can't afford it just yet. I never overstep my allowance, and I shall have to if I get any more finery. Come, we ought not to waste time here if you have all the patterns you want." And Rose walked quickly away, glad that it was out of her power to break through 2 resolutions, which hitherto had been faithfully kept, one to dress simply for example's sake, the other not to be extravagant for charity's sake. As Rosamond had her day of misfortunes, so this seemed to be one of small temptations to Rose. After she had set Kitty down at home and been to see her new houses, she drove about doing various errands for the aunts, and, while waiting in the carriage for the execution of an order, young Pemberton came by. As Steve said, this gentleman had been hard hit and still hovered moth-like about the forbidden light. Being the most eligible party of the season, his regard was considered a distinction to be proud of, and Rose had been well scolded by Aunt Clara for refusing so honorable a mate. The girl liked him, and he was the suitor of whom she had spoken so respectfully to Dr. Alec, because he had no need of the heiress and had sincerely loved Rose. He had been away, and she hoped had gotten over his disappointment as happily as the rest, but now when he saw her and came hurrying up so hungry for a word, she felt that he had not forgotten and was too kind to chill him with the bow which plainly says, "Don't stop." A personable youth was Pemberton, and had brought with him from the wilds of Canada a sable-lined overcoat which was the envy of every masculine and the admiration of every feminine friend he had. And as he stood at her carriage window, Rose knew that this luxurious garment and its stalwart wearer were objects of interest to the passers-by. It chanced that the tide of shoppers flowed in that direction, and as she chatted, familiar faces often passed with glances, smiles, and nods of varying curiosity, significance, and wonder. She could not help feeling a certain satisfaction in giving him a moment's pleasure, since she could do no more. But it was not that amiable desire alone which made her ignore the neat white parcels which the druggist's boy deposited on the front seat, and kept her lingering a little longer to enjoy one of the small triumphs which girls often risk more than a cold in the head to display. The sight of several snowflakes on the broad shoulders which partially obstructed her view, as well as the rapidly increasing animation of Pemberton's chat, reminded her that it was high time to go. "I mustn't keep you. It is beginning to storm," she said, taking up her muff, much to old Jacob's satisfaction, for small talk is not exciting to a hungry man whose nose feels like an icicle. "Is it? I thought the sun was shining." And the absorbed gentleman turned to the outer world with visible reluctance, for it looked very warm and cozy in the red-lined carriage. "Wise people say we must carry our sunshine with us," answered Rose, taking refuge in commonplaces, for the face at the window grew pensive suddenly as he answered with a longing look, "I wish I could." Then, smiling gratefully, he added, "Thank you for giving me a little of yours." "You are very welcome." And Rose offered him her hand while her eyes mutely asked pardon for withholding her leave to keep it. He pressed it silently and, shouldering the umbrella which he forgot to open, turned away with an "up again and take another" expression, which caused the soft eyes to follow him admiringly. I ought not to have kept him a minute longer than I could help, for it wasn't all pity. It was my foolish wish to show off and do as I liked for a minute, to pay for being good about the gown. Oh me, how weak and silly I am in spite of all my trying. And Miss Campbell fell into a remorseful reverie, which lasted till she got home. "Now, young man, what brought you out in this driving storm?" asked Rose as Jamie came stamping in that same afternoon. "Mama sent you a new book. Thought you'd like it. I don't mind your old storms," replied the boy, wrestling his way out of his coat and presenting a face as round and red and shiny as a well-polished Baldwin apple. "Much obliged. It is just the day to enjoy it, and I was longing for something nice to read," said Rose, as Jamie sat down upon the lower stair for a protracted struggle with his rubber boots. "Here you are, then. No, yes, I do believe I've forgotten it, after all," cried Jamie, slapping his pockets one after the other with a dismayed expression of countenance. "Never mind, I'll hunt up something else. Let me help you with those. Your hands are so cold." And Rose good-naturedly gave a tug at the boots while Jamie clutched the banisters, murmuring somewhat incoherently as his legs flew up and down, "I'll go back if you want me to. I'm so sorry. It's very good of you, I'm sure. Getting these horrid things on made me forget. Mother would make me wear 'em, though I told her they'd stick like gumdrops," he added, inspired by recollections of certain dire disappointments when the above-mentioned sweetmeat melted in his pockets and refused to come out. "Now, what shall we do?" asked Rose when he was finally extricated. "Since I've nothing to read, I may as well play." "I'll teach you to pitch and toss. You catch very well for a girl, but you can't throw worth a cent," replied Jamie, gambolling down the hall in his slippers and producing a ball from some of the mysterious receptacles in which boys have the art of storing rubbish enough to fill a peck measure. Of course, Rose agreed, and cheerfully risked getting her eyes blackened and her fingers bruised till her young receptor gratefully observed that it was no fun playing where you had to look out for windows and jars and things, so I'd like that jolly book about Captain Nemo and the Nautilus, please. Being gratified, he spread himself upon the couch, crossed his legs in the air, and without another word dived 20,000 leagues under the sea, where he remained for 2 mortal hours, to the general satisfaction of his relatives. Bereft both of her unexpected playfellow and the much-desired book, Rose went into the parlor, there to discover a French novel which Kitty had taken from a library and left in the carriage among the bundles. Settling herself in her favorite lounging chair, she read as diligently as Jamie, while the wind howled and snow fell fast without. For an hour, nothing disturbed the cozy quiet of the house, for Aunt Plenty was napping upstairs, and Dr. Alec writing in his own sanctum. At least Rose thought so, till his step made her hastily drop the book and look up with very much the expression she used to wear when caught in mischief years ago. "Did I startle you? Have a screen. You are burning your face before this hot fire." And Dr. Alec pulled one forward. "Thank you, Uncle. I didn't feel it." And the color seemed to deepen in spite of the screen, while the uneasy eyes fell upon the book in her lap. "Have you got the Quarterly there? I want to glance at an article in it, if you can spare it for a moment," he said, leaning toward her with an inquiring glance. "No, sir, I am reading." And, without mentioning the name, Rose put the book into his hand. The instant his eye fell on the title, he understood the look she wore and knew what mischief she had been in. He knit his brows, then smiled, because it was impossible to help it. Rose looked so conscience-stricken in spite of her 20 years. "How do you find it? Interesting?" "Oh, very. I felt as if I was in another world and forgot all about this." Not a very good world, I fancy, if you were afraid or ashamed to be found in it. Where did this come from? Asked Dr. Alec, surveying the book with great disfavor. Rose told him, and added slowly, I particularly wanted to read it, and fancied I might, because you did when it was so much talked about the winter we were in Rome. I did read it to see if it was fit for you, and decided that it was not, I suppose, since you never gave it to me. Yes. Then I won't finish it, but, Uncle, I don't see why I should not, added Rose wistfully, for she had reached the heart of the romance and found it wonderfully fascinating. You may not see, but don't you feel why not? Asked Dr. Alec gravely. Rose leaned her flushed cheek on her hand and thought a minute, then looked up and answered honestly, Yes, I do, but can't explain it, except that I know something must be wrong, because I blushed and started when you came in. Exactly, and the doctor gave an emphatic nod, as if the symptoms pleased him. But I really don't see any harm in the book so far. It is by a famous author, wonderfully well written, as you know, and the characters so lifelike that I feel as if I should really meet them somewhere. I hope not, ejaculated the doctor, shutting the book quickly, as if to keep the objectionable beings from escaping. Rose laughed, but persisted in her defense, for she did want to finish the absorbing story, yet would not without leave. I have read French novels before, and you gave them to me. Not many, to be sure, but the best, so I think I know what is good, and shouldn't like this if it was harmful. Her uncle's answer was to reopen the volume and turn the leaves an instant, as if to find a particular place. Then he put it into her hand, saying quietly, Read a page or two aloud, translating as you go. You used to like that. Try it again. Rose obeyed and went glibly down a page, doing her best to give the sense in her purest English. Presently she went more slowly, then skipped a sentence here and there, and finally stopped short, looking as if she needed a screen again. What's the matter? Asked her uncle, who had been watching her with a serious eye. Some phrases are untranslatable, and it only spoils them to try. They are not amiss in French, but sound coarse and bad in our blunt English, she said a little pettishly, for she felt annoyed by her failure to prove the contested point. Ah, my dear, if the fine phrases won't bear putting into honest English, the thoughts they express won't bear putting into your innocent mind. That chapter is the key to the whole book, and if you had been led up, or rather down, to it artfully and artistically, you might have read it to yourself without seeing how bad it is. All the worse for the undeniable talent which hides the evil so subtly and makes the danger so delightful. He paused a moment, then added, with an anxious glance at the book, over which she was still bending, Finish it, if you choose. Only remember, my girl, that one may read at 40 what is unsafe at 20, and that we never can be too careful what food we give that precious yet perilous thing called imagination. And taking his review, he went away to look over a learned article which interested him much less than the workings of a young mind nearby. Another long silence, broken only by an occasional excited bounce from Jamie when the sociable cuttlefish looked in at the windows or the Nautilus scuttled a ship or two in its terrific course. A bell rang, and the doctor popped his head out to see if he was wanted. It was only a message for Aunt Plenty, and he was about to pop in again when his eye was caught by a square parcel on the slab. "What's this?" he asked, taking it up. "Rose wants me to leave it at Kitty Van's when I go. I forgot to bring her book from Mama, so I shall go and get it as soon as ever I've done this," replied Jamie from his nest. As the volume in his hands was a corpulent one, and Jamie only a third of the way through, Dr. Alec thought Rose's prospect rather doubtful, and, slipping the parcel into his pocket, he walked away, saying with a satisfied air, "Virtue doesn't always get rewarded, but it shall be this time if I can do it." More than half an hour afterward, Rose woke from a little nap and found the various old favorites with which she had tried to solace herself replaced by the simple, wholesome story promised by Aunt Jessie. Good boy, I'll go and thank him, she said half aloud, jumping up, wide awake and much pleased. But she did not go, for just then she spied her uncle standing on the rug, warming his hands, with a generally fresh and breezy look about him, which suggested a recent struggle with the elements. "How did this come?" she asked suspiciously. "A man brought it." "This man? Oh, Uncle, why did you take so much trouble just to gratify a wish of mine?" she cried, taking both the cold hands in hers, with a tenderly reproachful glance from the storm without to the ruddy face above her. "Because, having taken away your French bonbons with the poisonous color on them, I wanted to get you something better. Here it is, all pure sugar, the sort that sweetens the heart as well as the tongue, and leaves no bad taste behind. How good you are to me! I don't deserve it, for I didn't resist temptation, though I tried. Uncle, after I'd put the book away, I thought I must just see how it ended. And I'm afraid I should have read it all if it had not been gone," said Rose, laying her face down on the hands she held as humbly as a repentant child. But Uncle Alec lifted up the bent head and, looking into the eyes that met his frankly, though either held a tear, he said, with the energy that always made his words remembered, "My little girl, I would face a dozen storms far worse than this to keep your soul as stainless as snow, for it is the small temptations which undermine integrity unless we watch and pray and never think them too trivial to be resisted." Some people would consider Dr. Alec an over-careful man, but Rose felt that he was right, and when she said her prayers that night, added a meek petition to be kept from yielding to 3 of the small temptations which beset a rich, pretty, and romantic girl: extravagance, coquetry, and novel reading. Chapter 12. At Kitty's Ball. Rose had no new gown to wear on this festive occasion, and gave one little sigh of regret as she put on the pale blue silk refreshed with clouds of gaze de chambray. But a smile followed, very bright and sweet, as she added the clusters of forget-me-not which Charlie had conjured up through the agency of an old German florist, for one part of her plan had been carried out, and Prince was invited to be her escort, much to his delight, though he wisely made no protestations of any sort and showed his gratitude by being a model gentleman. This pleased Rose, for the late humiliation and a very sincere desire to atone for it gave him an air of pensive dignity which was very effective. Aunt Clara could not go, for a certain new cosmetic, privately used to improve the once fine complexion, which had been her pride till late hours impaired it, had brought out an unsightly eruption, reducing her to the depths of woe, and leaving her no solace for her disappointment but the sight of the elegant velvet dress spread forth upon her bed in melancholy state. So Aunt Jessie was chaperone, to Rose's great satisfaction, and looked as pretty as a pink, Archie thought, in her matronly pearl-colored gown with a dainty trifle of rich lace on her still abundant hair. He was very proud of his little mamma, and as devoted as a lover, to keep his hand in against Phoebe's return, she said laughingly, when he brought her a nosegay of blush roses to light up her quiet costume. A happier mother did not live than Mrs. Jessie, as she sat contentedly beside Sister Jane, who graced the frivolous scene in a serious black gown with a diadem of purple asters nodding above her severe brow. Both watching their boys with the maternal conviction that no other parent could show such remarkable specimens as these. Each had done her best according to her light, and years of faithful care were now beginning to bear fruit in the promise of goodly men, so dear to the hearts of true mothers. Mrs. Jessie watched her 3 tall sons with something like wonder, for Archie was a fine fellow, grave and rather stately, but full of the cordial courtesy and respect we see so little of nowadays, and which is the sure sign of good home training. The cadets, as Will and Geordie called themselves, were there as gorgeous as you please, and the agonies they suffered that night with tight boots and stiff collars no pen can fitly tell. But only to one another did they confide these sufferings and the rare moments of repose when they could stand on one aching foot with heads comfortably sunken inside the excruciating collars, which rasped their ears and made the lobes thereof a pleasing scarlet. Brief were these moments, however, and the Spartan boys danced on with smiling faces, undaunted by the hidden anguish which preyed upon them fore and aft, as Will expressed it. Mrs. Jane's pair were an odd contrast, and even the stern disciplinarian herself could not help smiling as she watched them. Steve was superb and might have been married on the spot, so superfine was his broadcloth, glossy his linen, and perfect the fit of his gloves. While pride and happiness so fermented in his youthful bosom, there would have been danger of spontaneous combustion if dancing had not proved a safety valve, for his strong sense of the proprieties would not permit him to vent his emotions in any other way. Kitty felt no such restraint and looked like a blissful little gypsy, with her brunette prettiness set off by a dashing costume of cardinal and cream color, and every hair on her head curled in a merry Pecksniffian crop, for youth was her strong point, and she much enjoyed the fact that she had been engaged 3 times before she was 19. To see her and Steve spin around the room was a sight to bring a smile to the lips of the crustiest bachelor or saddest spinster, for happy lovers are always a pleasing spectacle, and 2 such merry little grigs as these are seldom seen. Mac, meantime, with glasses astride his nose, surveyed his brother's performances on the light fantastic, very much as a benevolent Newfoundland would the gambols of a toy terrier, receiving with thanks the hasty hints for his guidance which Steve breathed into his ear as he passed, and forgetting all about them the next minute. When not thus engaged, Mac stood about with his thumbs in his vest pockets, regarding the lively crowd like a meditative philosopher of a cheerful aspect, often smiling to himself at some whimsical fancy of his own, knitting his brows as some bit of ill-natured gossip met his ear, or staring with undisguised admiration as a beautiful face or figure caught his eye. "I hope that girl knows what a treasure she has got, but I doubt if she ever fully appreciates it," said Mrs. Jane, bringing her spectacles to bear upon Kitty as she whisked by, causing quite a gale with her flying skirts. "I think she will, for Steve has been so well brought up, she cannot but see and feel the worth of what she has never had, and being so young, she will profit by it," answered Mrs. Jessie softly, thinking of the days when she and her Jem danced together, just betrothed. "I've done my duty by both the boys, and done it thoroughly, or their father would have spoilt them, for he's no more idea of discipline than a child." And Aunt Jane gave her own palm a smart rap with her closed fan, emphasizing the word thoroughly in a most suggestive manner. "I've often wished I had your firmness, Jane, but after all, I'm not sure that I don't like my own way best, at least with my boys, for plenty of love and plenty of patience seem to have succeeded pretty well." And Aunt Jessie lifted the nosegay from her lap, feeling as if that unfailing love and patience were already blooming into her life as beautifully as the sweet-breathed roses given by her boy refreshed and brightened these long hours of patient waiting in a corner. "I don't deny that you've done well, Jessie, but you've been let alone and had no one to hold your hand or interfere. If my Mac had gone to sea as your Jem did, I never should have been as severe as I am. Men are so perverse and short-sighted, they don't trouble about the future as long as things are quiet and comfortable in the present," continued Mrs. Jane, quite forgetting that the short-sighted partner of the firm, physically speaking at least, was herself. "Ah, yes, we mothers love to foresee and foretell our children's lives even before they are born, and are very apt to be disappointed if they do not turn out as we planned. I know I am. Yet I really have no cause to complain, and I'm learning to see that all we can do is to give the dear boys good principles and the best training we may, then leave them to finish what we have begun. And Mrs. Jessie's eye wandered away to Archie, dancing with Rose, quite unconscious what a pretty little castle in the air tumbled down when he fell in love with Phoebe. Right, quite right on that point. We agree exactly. I have spared nothing to give my boys good principles and good habits, and I am willing to trust them anywhere. 9 times did I whip my Steve to cure him of fibbing, and over again did Mac go without his dinner rather than wash his hands. But I whipped and starved them both into obedience, and now I have my reward, concluded the stern parent with a proud wave of the fan, which looked very like a ferule, being as big, hard, and uncompromising as such an article could be. Mrs. Jessie gave a mild murmur of assent, but could not help thinking, with a smile, that in spite of their early tribulations, the sins for which the boys suffered had gotten a little mixed in their result, for fibbing Steve was now the tidy one, and careless Mac the truth-teller. But such small contradictions will happen in the best-regulated families, and all perplexed parents can do is to keep up a steadfast preaching and practicing in the hope that it will bear fruit sometime, for, according to an old proverb, children pick up words as pigeons peas, to utter them again as God shall please. I hope they won't dance the child to death among them, for each one seems bound to have his turn, even your sober Mac, said Mrs. Jessie a few minutes later, as she saw Archie hand Rose over to his cousin, who carried her off with an air of triumph from several other claimants. She's very good to him, and her influence is excellent, for he is of an age now when a young woman's opinion has more weight than an old one's, though he is always good to his mother, and I feel as if I should take great comfort in him. He's one of the sort who will not marry till late, if ever, being fond of books and a quiet life, responded Mrs. Jane. Remembering how often her son had expressed his belief that philosophers should not marry, and brought up Plato as an example of the serene wisdom to be attained only by a single man, while her husband sided with Socrates, for whom he felt a profound sympathy, though he didn't dare to own it. Well, I don't know about that. Since my Archie surprised me by losing his heart as he did, I'm prepared for anything and advise you to do likewise. I really shouldn't wonder if Mac did something remarkable in that line, though he shows no sign of it yet, I confess, answered Mrs. Jessie, laughing. It won't be in that direction, you may be sure, for her fate is sealed. Dear me, how sad it is to see a superior girl like that about to throw herself away on a handsome scapegrace. I won't mention names, but you understand me. And Mrs. Jane shook her head, as if she could mention the name of one superior girl who had thrown herself away and now saw the folly of it. I'm very anxious, of course, and so is Alec, but it may be the saving of one party and the happiness of the other, for some women love to give more than they receive, said Mrs. Jessie, privately wondering, for the 1000th time, why Brother Mac ever married the learned Miss Humphreys. You'll see that it won't prosper, and I shall always maintain that a wife cannot entirely undo a mother's work. Rose will have her hands full if she tries to set all Clara's mistakes right, answered Aunt Jane grimly, then began to fan violently as their hostess approached to have a dish of chat about our dear young people. Rose was in a merry mood that night and found Mac quite ready for fun, which was fortunate since her first remark set them off on a droll subject. "Oh, Mac, Annabelle has just confided to me that she is engaged to Fun C. Think of her going to housekeeping in Canton someday and having to order rats, puppies, and bird's nest soup for dinner," whispered Rose, too much amused to keep the news to herself. "By Confucius, isn't that a sweet prospect?" and Mac burst out laughing, to the great surprise of his neighbors, who wondered what there was amusing about the Chinese sage. It is rather alarming, though, to have these infants going on at this rate. Seems to be catching a new sort of scarlet fever, to judge by Annabel's cheeks and Kitty's gown, he added, regarding the aforesaid ladies with eyes still twinkling with merriment. Don't be ungallant, but go and do likewise, for it is all the fashion. I heard Mrs. Van tell old Mrs. Joy that it was going to be a marrying year, so you'll be sure to catch it, answered Rose, reefing her skirts, for with all his training, Mac still found it difficult to keep his long legs out of the man-traps. It doesn't look like a painful disease, but I must be careful, for I've no time to be ill now. What are the symptoms? Asked Mac, trying to combine business with pleasure and improve his mind while doing his duty. If you ever come back, I'll tell you, laughed Rose, as he danced away into the wrong corner, bumped smartly against another gentleman, and returned as soberly as if that was the proper figure. Well, tell me how not to do it, he said, subsiding for a moment's talk when Rose had floated to and fro in her turn. Oh, you see some young girl who strikes you as particularly charming, whether she really is or not, doesn't matter a bit, and you begin to think about her a great deal, to want to see her, and to get generally sentimental and absurd, began Rose, finding it difficult to give a diagnosis of the most mysterious disease under the sun. Don't think it sounds enticing. Can't I find an antidote somewhere? For if it is in the air this year, I'm sure to get it, and it may be fatal, said Mac, who felt pretty lively and liked to make Rose merry, for he suspected that she had a little trouble from a hint Dr. Alec had given him. I hope you will catch it, because you'll be so funny. Will you take care of me as you did before, or have you got your hands full? I'll help, but really with Archie and Steve and Charlie, I shall have enough to do. You'd better take it lightly the first time, and so won't need much care. Very well, how shall I begin? Enlighten my ignorance and start me right, I beg. Go about and see people, make yourself agreeable, and not sit in corners observing other people as if they were puppets dancing for your amusement. I heard Mrs. Van once say that propinquity works wonders, and she ought to know, having married off 2 daughters and just engaged a 3rd to a most charming young man. Good lack, the cure sounds worse than the disease. Propinquity, hey? Why, I may be in danger this identical moment and can't flee from my life, said Mac, gently touching her round the waist for a general waltz. Don't be alarmed, but mind your steps, for Charlie is looking at us, and I want you to do your best. That's perfect. Take me quite round, for I love to waltz and seldom get a good turn except with you boys, said Rose, smiling up at him approvingly, as his strong arm guided her among the revolving couples, and his feet kept time without a fault. This certainly is a great improvement on the chair business, to which I have devoted myself with such energy that I've broken the backs of 2 partners and dislocated the arm of the old rocker. I took an occasional turn with that heavy party, thinking it good practice in case I ever happened to dance with stout ladies. And Mac nodded toward Annabel, pounding gaily with Mr. Tokyo, whose yellow countenance beamed as his beady eyes rested on his plump fiancé. Pausing in the midst of her merriment at the image of Mac and the old rocking chair, Rose said reprovingly, "Though a heathen shiny, fun puts you to shame, for he did not ask foolish questions, but went a-wooing like a sensible little man, and I've no doubt Annabel will be very happy. Choose me a suitable divinity, and I will try to adore. Can I do more than that to retrieve my character?" answered Mac, safely landing his partner and plying the fan according to instructions. "How would Emma do?" inquired Rose, whose sense of the ludicrous was strong, and who could not resist the temptation of horrifying Mac by the suggestion. "Never. It sets my teeth on edge to look at her tonight. I suppose that dress is a sweet thing just out, but upon my word, she reminds me of nothing but a harlequin ice. and Mac turned his back on her with a shudder, for he was sensitive to discords of all kinds. She certainly does, and that mixture of chocolate, pea green, and pink is simply detestable, though many people would consider it decidedly chic, to use her favorite word. I suppose you will dress your wife like a Spartan matron of the time of Lycurgus, added Rose, much tickled by his new conceit. I'll wait till I get her before I decide, but one thing I'm sure of, she shall not dress like a Greek dancer of the time of Pericles, answered Mac, regarding with great disfavor a young lady who, having a statuesque figure, affected drapery of the scanty and clinging description. Then it is of no use to suggest that classic creature. So as you reject my first attempts, I won't go on, but look about me quietly, and you had better do the same. Seriously, Mac, more gaiety and less study would do you good, for you will grow old before your time if you shut yourself up and pore over books so much. I don't believe there is a younger or jollier feeling fellow in the room than I am, though I may not conduct myself like a dancing dervish. But I own you may be right about the books, for there are many sorts of intemperance, and a library is as irresistible to me as a bar-room to a toper. I shall have to sign a pledge and cork up the only bottle that tempts me, my inkstand. I'll tell you how to make it easier to abstain. Stop studying and write a novel into which you can put all your wise things and so clear your brains for a new start by and by. Do, I should so like to read it, cried Rose, delighted with the project, for she was sure Matt could do anything he liked in that line. First live, then write. How can I go to romancing till I know what romance means? He asked soberly, feeling that so far he had had very little in his life. Then you must find out, and nothing will help you more than to love someone very much. Do as I've advised, and be a modern Diogenes, going about with spectacles instead of a lantern in search, not of an honest man, but a perfect woman. I do hope you will be successful. And Rose made her curtsy as the dance ended. I don't expect perfection, but I should like one as good as they ever make them nowadays. If you are looking for the honest man, I wish you success in return, said Mac, relinquishing her fan with a glance of such sympathetic significance that a quick flush of feeling rose to the girl's face as she answered very low, "If honesty was all I wanted, I certainly have found it in you." Then she went away with Charlie, who was waiting for his turn, and Mac roamed about, wondering if anywhere in all that crowd his future wife was hidden, saying to himself, as he glanced from face to face, quite unresponsive to the various allurements displayed, "What care I how fair she be, if she be not fair for me?" Just before supper, several young ladies met in the dressing room to repair damages, and, being friends, they fell into discourse as they smoothed their locks and had their tattered furbelows sewed or pinned up by the neat-handed Phyllis in leading. When each had asked the other, "How do I look tonight, dear?" and been answered with reciprocal enthusiasm, "Perfectly lovely, darling," Kitty said to Rose, who was helping her to restore order out of the chaos to which much exercise had reduced her curls, "By the way, young Randall is dying to be presented to you. May I after supper?" "No, thank you," answered Rose very decidedly. "Well, I'm sure I don't see why not," began Kitty, looking displeased but not surprised. "I think you do, else why didn't you present him when he asked? You seldom stop to think of etiquette. Why did you now?" "I didn't like to do it till I had you. You are so particular, I thought you'd say no, but I couldn't tell him so," stammered Kitty, feeling that she had better have settled the matter herself, for Rose was very particular and had a special reason to dislike this person because he was not only a dissipated young reprobate himself, but seemed possessed of Satan to lead others astray likewise. "I don't wish to be rude, dear, but I really must decline, for I cannot know such people, even though I meet them here," said Rose. Remembering Charlie's revelations on New Year's night and hardening her heart against the man who had been his undoing on that, as well as on other occasions, she had reason to believe. I couldn't help it. Old Mr. Randall and Papa are friends, and though I spoke of it, Brother Alf wouldn't hear of passing that bad boy over, explained Kitty eagerly. Yet Alf forbade you driving or skating with him, for he knows better than me how unfit he is to come among us. I'd drop him tomorrow if I could, but I must be civil in my own house. His mother brought him, and he won't dare to behave here as he does at their bachelor parties. She ought not to have brought him till he had shown some desire to mend his ways. It is none of my business, I know, but I do wish people wouldn't be so inconsistent, letting boys go to destruction and then expecting us girls to receive them like decent people. Rose spoke in an energetic whisper, but Annabel heard her and exclaimed, as she turned round with a powder puff in her hand, "My goodness, Rose, what is all that about going to destruction?" She is being strong-minded, and I don't very much blame her in this case, but it leaves me in a dreadful scrape, said Kitty, supporting her spirits with a sniff of aromatic vinegar. I appeal to you, since you heard me, and there's no one here but ourselves. Do you consider young Randall a nice person to know? And Rose turned to Annabel and Emma with an anxious eye, for she did not find it easy to abide by her principles when so doing annoyed friends. No, indeed, he's perfectly horrid. Papa says he and Gorham are the wildest young men he knows, and enough to spoil the whole set. I'm so glad I've got no brothers, responded Annabel, placidly powdering her pink arms, quite undeterred by the memory of sundry white streaks left on sundry coat sleeves. I think that sort of scrupulousness is very ill-bred, if you'll excuse my saying so, Rose. We are not supposed to know anything about fastness and wildness and so on, but to treat every man alike and not be fussy and prudish, said Emma, settling her many-colored streamers with the superior air of a woman of the world, aged 20. Ah, but we do know, and if our silence and civility have no effect, we ought to try something else, and not encourage wickedness of any kind. We needn't scold and preach, but we can refuse to know such people, and that will do some good, for they don't like to be shunned and shut out from respectable society. Uncle Alec told me not to know that man, and I won't. Rose spoke with unusual warmth, forgetting that she could not tell the real reason for her strong prejudice against that man. Well, I know him. I think him very jolly, and I'm engaged to dance the German with him after supper. He leads quite as well as your cousin Charlie, and is quite as fascinating, some people think, returned Emma, tossing her head disdainfully, for Prince Charming did not worship at her shrine, and it piqued her vanity. In spite of her quandary, Rose could not help smiling as she recalled Mac's comparison, for Emma turned so red with spiteful chagrin she seemed to have added strawberry ice to the other varieties composing the harlequin. Each must judge for herself. I shall follow Aunt Jessie's advice and try to keep my atmosphere as pure as I can, for she says every woman has her own little circle, and in it can use her influence for good if she will. I do will heartily, and I'll prove that I'm neither proud nor fussy by receiving, here or at home, any respectable man you like to present to me, no matter how poor or plain or insignificant he may be. With which declaration Rose ended her protest, and the four damsels streamed downstairs together like a wandering rainbow. But Kitty laid to heart what she had said. Annabel took credit herself for siding with her, and Emma owned that she was not trying to keep her atmosphere pure when she came to dance with the objectionable Randall. So Rose's little circle was the better for the influence she tried to exert, although she never knew it. At supper time, Charlie kept near her, and she was quite content with him, for he drank only coffee, and she saw him shake his head with a frown when young Van beckoned him toward an anteroom, from whence the sound of popping corks had issued with increasing frequency as the evening wore on. "Dear fellow, he does try," thought Rose, longing to show how she admired his self-denial, but she could only say, as they left the supper room with the aunts who were going early, "If I had not promised Uncle to get home as soon after midnight as possible, I'd stay and dance the German with you, for you deserve a reward tonight." "1,000 thanks, but I am going when you do," answered Charlie, understanding both her look and words, and very grateful for them. "Really?" cried Rose, delighted. "Really, I'll be in the hall when you come down." And Charlie thought the Fra Angelico angel was not half so bright and beautiful as the one who looked back at him out of a pale blue cloud as Rose went upstairs as if on wings. When she came down again, Charlie was not in the hall, however, and after waiting a few minutes, Mac offered to go and find him, for Aunt Jane was still hunting a lost rubber above. "Please say I'm ready, but he needn't come if he doesn't want to," said Rose, not wishing to demand too much of her promising penitent.
"If he has gone into that bar room, I'll have him out, no matter who is there," growled Mac to himself as he made his way to the small apartment whither the gentleman retired for a little private refreshment when the spirit moved, as it often did. The door was ajar, and Charlie seemed to have just entered, for Mac heard a familiar voice call out in a jovial tone, "Come, Prince, you're just in time to help us drink Steve's health with all the honors." "Can't stop. Only ran in to say goodnight, Van. Had a capital time, but I'm on duty and must go." "That's a new dodge. Take a stirrup cup anyway, and come back in time for a merry-go-rounder when you've disposed of the ladies," answered the young host, diving into the wine cooler for another bottle. "Charlie's going in for sanctity, and it doesn't seem to agree with him," laughed one of the 2 other young men who occupied several chairs apiece, resting their souls in every sense of the word. "Apron strings are coming into fashion. The bluer the better, hey, Prince?" added the other, trying to be witty with the usual success. "You'd better go home early yourself, Barrow, or that tongue of yours will get you into trouble," retorted Charlie, conscious that he ought to take his own advice, yet lingering, nervously putting on his gloves while the glasses were being filled. "Now, brother-in-law, fire away. Here you are, Prince." And Steve handed a glass across the table to his cousin, feeling too much elated with various pleasurable emotions to think what he was doing, for the boys all knew Charlie's weakness and usually tried to defend him from it. Before the glass could be taken, however, Mac entered in a great hurry, delivering his message in an abbreviated and rather peremptory form. "Rose is waiting for you. Hurry up." "All right. Good night, old fellows." And Charlie was off, as if the name had power to stop him in the very act of breaking the promise made to himself. "Come, Solon, take a social drop and give us an epithalamium in your best Greek. Here's to you." And Steve was lifting the wine to his own lips when Mac knocked the glass out of his hand with a flash of the eye that caused his brother to stare at him with his mouth open in an imbecile sort of way, which seemed to excite Mac still more. For turning to his young host, he said in a low voice and with a look that made the gentlemen on the chairs sit up suddenly, "I beg pardon, Van, for making a mess, but I can't stand by and see my own brother tempt another man beyond his strength or make a brute of himself. That's plain English, but I can't help speaking out, for I know not one of you would willingly hurt Charlie, and you will if you don't let him alone." "What do you pitch into me for? I've done nothing. A fellow must be civil in his own house, mustn't he?" asked Van good-humoredly as he faced about, corkscrew in hand. "Yes, but it is not civil to urge or joke a guest into doing what you know and he knows is bad for him. That's only a glass of wine to you, but it is perdition to Charlie, and if Steve knew what he was about, he'd cut his right hand off before he'd offer it." "Do you mean to say I'm tipsy?" demanded Steve, ruffling up like a little gamecock, for though he saw now what he had done and was ashamed of it, he hated to have Mac air his peculiar motions before other people.
With excitement, not champagne, I hope, for I wouldn't own you if you were, answered Mac, in whom indignation was effervescing like the wine in the forgotten bottle, for the men were all young, friends of Steve's and admirers of Charlie's. Look here, boys, he went on more quietly. I know I ought not to explode in this violent sort of way, but upon my life I couldn't help it when I heard what you were saying and saw what Steve was doing. Since I have begun, I may as well finish and tell you straight out that Prince can't stand this sort of thing. He is trying to flee temptation, and whoever leads him into it does a cowardly and sinful act, for the loss of one's own self-respect is bad enough without losing the more precious things that make life worth having. Don't tell him I've said this, but lend a hand if you can, and never have to reproach yourselves with the knowledge that you helped to ruin a fellow creature, soul and body. It was well for the success of Mac's first crusade that his hearers were gentlemen and sober, so his outburst was not received with jeers or laughter, but listened to in silence, while the expression of the faces changed from one of surprise to regret and respect, for earnestness is always effective, and championship of this sort seldom fails to touch hearts as yet unspoiled. As he paused with an eloquent little quiver in his eager voice, Van corked the bottle at a blow, threw down the corkscrew, and offered Mac his hand, saying heartily, in spite of his slang, "You are a first-class old brick. I'll lend a hand for one, and do my best to back up Charlie, for he's the finest fellow I know, and shan't go to the devil like poor Randall if I can help it." Murmurs of applause from the others seemed to express a general assent to this vigorous statement, and, giving the hand a grateful shake, Mac retreated to the door, anxious to be off now that he had freed his mind with such unusual impetuosity. "Count on me for anything I can do in return for this, Van. I'm sorry to be such a marplot, but you can take it out in quizzing me after I'm gone. I'm fair game, and Steve can set you going." With that, Mac departed as abruptly as he had come, feeling that he had made a mess of it, but comforting himself with the thought that perhaps he had secured help for Charlie at his own expense, and thinking with a droll smile as he went back to his mother, "My romance begins by looking after other girls' lovers instead of finding a sweetheart for myself, but I can't tell Rose, so she won't laugh at me."